What if I told you that the storm you're in right now isn't meant to break you, but to prepare you? That everything you've lost, every battle you've fought has been leading to something greater? Stop doubting. God is moving and your storm is ending. But are you ready for what comes next? Before we begin, I invite you to join this journey of truth and transformation. Subscribe now, and together, let us seek wisdom beyond the storm. If this speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may be the very encouragement someone else needs today. There is a peculiar temptation in suffering to believe it will never end. When trials press upon us, they distort our sense of time, making pain feel infinite. The road ahead appears lost in fog, and we begin to wonder if light will ever break through. Yet this is the great lie of the storm. It shouts that it is unending, but it is not. It has an appointed time, and it must pass. No darkness, however thick, has ever held back the dawn. Consider the waves of the sea, powerful, relentless, unyielding. They rise and roar, thrashing against the shore as if they will consume everything in their path. But watch long enough and you will see them retreat. They may return again and again, but they do not stay. The storm does not own the sea, it only visits. In the same way, the trials of life may shake you, but they do not have the power to define you. A man in the midst of suffering often believes it to be the end of the story. He cannot see beyond the present agony, and he mistakes the silence of God for his absence. But silence is not abandonment, it is preparation. The farmer does not rush the seed to sprout, nor does he curse the soil when the growth is unseen. He knows that beneath the surface, something is happening. The storm, too, has its hidden purpose. It uproots what is weak, strengthens what is tested, and clears the way for something greater. It is a dangerous thing to build one's identity around suffering. Pain can be so familiar that we cling to it, mistaking it for the only reality. But that is not what you were made for. You were not created to live in perpetual struggle, but to endure through it and emerge refined. When the storm has done its work, it will pass, for it is not sovereign. It obeys a greater hand. Time itself is proof that nothing remains forever except what is eternal. The grief that once threatened to break you will one day be a memory. The night you thought would never end will fade into morning. The enemy whispers that your suffering is your final chapter, but he is wrong. The page will turn, the storm will lift, and when it does, you will see that the one who allowed it also ordained its end. There is a weight that men carry, the weight of yesterday. It lingers like an old shadow, whispering that nothing can change, that what has been must always be. The past, with all its failures and wounds, takes root in the mind, and soon a man begins to believe he is bound to it. He tells himself that his mistakes have set the course, that his regrets have written the story. But such thinking is a grave deception, for it assumes that the author of time has run out of ink. God is not confined by what has been. He is not limited by the failures of men, nor does he consult their past before shaping their future. When he moves, he does so with purpose. And his purpose is not to repair what was, but to create what has never been. He is not merely in the business of restoration, he is in the business of transformation. He takes the broken, the weary, the spent, and from them he brings forth something entirely new. Consider the tree in winter. Its branches stand bare, stripped of all life, and to the eye it seems as though death has won. A man passing by might say, "This tree will never bloom again." But what he does not see is the unseen work, the stirring beneath the bark, the quiet preparation for spring. The tree is not dead, it is waiting. And when the appointed time comes, new life will burst forth, not the old leaves but new ones. So it is with the soul that trusts in God. What seems like an ending is often the prelude to a greater beginning. There are those who fear change, who would rather cling to familiar pain than step into the unknown. They have walked in sorrow so long that joy feels foreign, almost unwelcome. But God does not ask men to understand his ways, only to trust them. When he declares, "Behold, I am doing a new thing," it is not an idle promise. It is the breaking of dawn after a long night. The mistake men often make is believing that because they cannot see the work is not being done. But does a seed in the soil proclaim its growth before it breaks the ground? Does the river announce its course before it carves the valley? God's hand is often hidden, but it is never absent. What he is preparing in the unseen will in time be revealed. The past has its place, but it is not the architect of the future. Those who remain chained to it will never grasp what is ahead. The question is not whether God is doing something new, he is. The question is whether a man will have the faith to step forward when the door opens. For when God moves, he does not merely repair what was lost, he calls forth what never was, and the man who trusts him will find that his story has only just begun. Fear is the oldest weapon of the enemy, and perhaps his most effective. It does not need sharp edges or brute force, it only needs a whisper, a single doubt, a fleeting worry, and suddenly the heart begins to tremble. Fear does not announce itself with a roar, but seeps in like fog, quiet and unrelenting. It makes a man forget what he once knew, blind to what he once believed. The storm rages, the waves rise, and the voice of fear whispers, "Look at this. You are alone. You are doomed." Men listen. But fear is a deceiver. It presents itself as wisdom, as realism, as the only logical response to an overwhelming world. It tells us that trust is foolishness, that faith is blindness, that unless we take matters into our own hands, we will surely perish. It is the voice that spoke to Peter on the water, not in words but in feeling, the sudden realization that the sea was too deep, that the wind was too strong, that no man had ever walked on water before. And at that moment, he began to sink, not because the waves grew stronger, but because his faith faltered. The enemy does not need to steal a man's strength, he only needs to take his trust. If he can turn his eyes away from God and toward the storm, the battle is already won. Fear breeds hesitation, hesitation breeds doubt, and doubt makes men retreat from the very place where victory was meant to be won. How many times has God called a man forward, only for fear to persuade him to stay where he is? How many prayers have gone unanswered, not because God was unwilling, but because the man praying refused to believe? Faith is not the absence of storms. It is not the denial of difficulty or the refusal to acknowledge danger. Faith is what stands in the storm and says, "I see the waves, but I trust the one who walks on them." It is the certainty that the one who commands the wind does not sleep, that the one who calls his children by name has not forgotten them. Faith does not silence the storm, but it renders it powerless. There is no situation, no hardship, no suffering in which fear is the correct response. The world may call it wisdom to prepare for the worst, to build defenses against all manner of trouble, but this is not the way of the kingdom. The kingdom of God does not advance by the strength of men, but by the faith of those who believe in what they cannot yet see. A man who trusts in God does not need to see the path ahead. He only needs to know the one who leads him. The storm will pass, the wind will die down, but the lesson of faith is not learned in the calm, it is forged in the tempest. And in that refining, a man discovers something remarkable, that fear is a shadow, and trust in God is the light that drives it away. If these words are stirring something within you, do not let them pass like the wind. Pause for a moment, reflect, engage, and share your thoughts below. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. There is more to come, and I would not want you to miss it. Suffering is never meaningless, though it often feels that way. When trials come, they seem at first to be nothing but destruction, tearing away what was familiar, stripping a man of what he thought he could not live without. He looks at his loss and asks, why? But he asks as though pain were an interruption, as though the true course of life were ease and comfort. He does not yet see that trials do not come to ruin him, but to shape him into something stronger than he was before. A lump of iron, left as it is, remains nothing but metal. But place it in the fire, hammer it upon the anvil, and something remarkable happens. It does not perish in the heat, it is transformed. The blacksmith sees what it could be, sees the weapon, the tool, the strength waiting to emerge. The fire is not punishment. It is the process by which raw material becomes something useful. So it is with the soul of a man. When hardships press in, it is easy to believe they have come to break us, but it is just as possible, indeed far more likely, that they have come to prepare us. There are strengths we do not yet possess, wisdom we have not yet gained, and faith we have not yet learned to live by. And God, knowing what lies ahead, allows the fire to refine us. He does not delight in suffering, nor does he send it without purpose. But he will not spare a man from hardship, when hardship is the very thing that will ready him for the life he is meant to live. Men often pray for growth, but resist the means by which growth comes. They long for wisdom, but recoil at the lessons that teach it. They ask for strength, but wish to be spared the trials that produce it. Yet no man becomes strong by avoiding struggle, just as no tree grows deep roots without enduring the wind. A life free of hardship is not a blessing, it is a tragedy. It leaves a man untested, fragile, and unprepared for the battles ahead. There is a curious thing about suffering. It has a way of revealing what is true. It sifts a man, showing him what was mere pretense and what was real. The comforts he clung to are shaken, and in that shaking he sees what remains. If he has built his foundation on ease, on the belief that life ought to be smooth, he will find himself lost when trials come. But if he has built upon truth, upon faith in something greater than himself, then even in the storm, he will stand. No trial is wasted in the hands of God. Not one tear, not one burden, not one long night of struggle will be without purpose. For the man who endures, who does not turn back when the fire comes, will find that he has been changed. Not ruined, not undone, but refined. And when the next season comes, he will be ready. There comes a moment just after the storm when the air is still. The wind that once roared is gone. The sky that raged is now quiet, and the earth, though shaken, begins to settle. But something is different. The land is not as it was before. The trees that stood weak have been uprooted. The ground that once seemed firm has shifted. And yet, there is life. There is renewal. For though the storm has passed, it has not left things unchanged. So it is with the soul that has endured suffering. It does not emerge as it once was, nor should it. The hands that once clung to what was lost now open to receive what is new. The heart that once feared the tempest now beats with a quiet strength, knowing it has been carried through. What was shaken has been tested, and what remains is real. The old self, the one who doubted, who feared, who clung to comfort, is gone. And in his place stands someone who has walked through the valley and now steps into something greater. Men often think that the end of a trial is simply the return to what once was, as though life could be stitched back together exactly as it had been before. But that is not the way of things. God does not bring a man through the fire just to place him back in the same place he stood before. No, the trial was never about mere survival. It was about preparation. When the storm ends, it is not a return to the past, it is the threshold of something new. There is healing that comes after suffering, but it is not always the healing a man expects. He may wish for things to be restored exactly as they were, but God is not in the business of simple repairs. He does not merely mend, he recreates. He brings beauty from ashes, not by making the ashes disappear, but by using them to shape something even greater than before. What is lost is not always meant to return, for sometimes it is the very loss that clears the way for something greater. But there is a danger in stepping out of a storm, a temptation to hesitate. The mind, accustomed to struggle, resists ease. The heart, once so focused on enduring, forgets how to embrace the joy ahead. And so when the moment comes when God opens the door to a new season, some shrink back. They fear that another storm will come, that the calm is but an illusion. But to refuse the new beginning is to waste the trial that prepared them for it. There is always a purpose after the storm. The suffering was not without meaning. The endurance was not in vain. The same God who led through the darkness now calls forward into the light. And the one who steps forward in faith will find that the storm was not the end of the story, but the beginning of something far greater. You were never meant to live in the storm forever. It was a passage, not a destination. The trials that sought to break you have only shaped you. The pain that threatened to destroy you has instead refined you. And now the road before you is open, not to what was, but to what is yet to be. Do not long for the past. Do not shrink from the future. The God who carried you through the darkness now calls you into the light. Step forward with courage, for the storm did not come to end your story. It came to prepare you for the chapter that only he could write. You were not meant to walk this path alone. If this message has spoken to you, let it not end here. Subscribe so we may walk further together. Comment below, what storm has God brought you through? Your testimony is a light for those still in the dark.